Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shark in the gun, got the knowledge for the college. Football show breaks down the odds of scholars. 3-unit bangers, stacking cheddar like towers. Ride the wave, the fame flex in the midnight hours. 9 words of lifestyle, spitting flames, no pity. Dominate the board like kings, ruling the city. Sports, gambling, hustle, money moves so gritty. Cashing tickets every Friday, life looking pretty. Ride the wave, feel the rush, hit your dame. Shark in the gun, setting fire to the name. 3-unit banging, stacking chips, no shame. Friday night sports kings claiming that fame. Analyze stats, break bread, no sweat. 3-point spreads, risk life, major bet. Cash in pockets, feel.
On a suddenly not so casual Friday evening in September, it is CFB Knowledge for College Week 2, the Shark and the Gun, the ultimate bounce back show you will ever find for the two of us. We are angry, we are focused, and we are ready to dominate. Come over to YouTube, join the chat. Libations are going. Hope you guys are having a great night. A lot of football to discuss. Guns picks. What's going on, brother?
Yeah, reverse sweep. But however, the Sharps took a hit. The public cashed. You know what happens with that. The public gets a little bit too high on themselves. So you get high and they go into week 2 and lose all their cash. That's why you need to follow this show alone. The sharpest information on the planet. The Shark and the Gun. Knowledge for College. Week 2. I'm ready, Shark. Let's get it.
Not waiting around. Big time football. 12 noon tomorrow, September the 7th. It will be Ann Arbor, Michigan, welcoming Texas. Top-rated Texas. Michigan, a little underrated perhaps, but the Gun opening up 4 consecutive totals for us to open this broadcast. 12 o'clock, Texas, Michigan, under 44.5. Early week, 42 right now.
Yeah, getting a little bit strategical in week 2, focusing a little bit more, less on the sides, more on the totals. But looking at this game, you have Michigan coming off a 30-10 win versus Fresno State, despite only putting up 121 passing yards in that game, 148 yards on the ground, 4.3 yards per carry. So their offense wasn't clicking. A lot of that scoring was due to the defensive side of the ball. Now, Texas coming off a nice win for themselves, 52-0 versus Colorado State, and an abysmal Colorado State team, winning both sides of the ball, 355 yards passing yards, 190 on the ground, and holding Colorado State to 192 yards of total offense with a plus 353 net yard average in that game. While the offense for Michigan didn't look great, their defense looked great in that game, holding Fresno to 9 yards. That's right, 9 yards rushing in that game, 235 yards passing, and they also got 2 INTs, and including one that was a pick 6 in that game. So while the defense is doing very good, there are question marks on the offensive side. This is why I like the total. Texas did put up a lot of points, but they did it versus a Colorado State team that gave up 468 yards of total offense to their opponents in 2023. And they face a weaker non-conference schedule in that. So don't get a little bit twisted about the performance of Texas. They just played a team that is Swiss cheese on the defensive side of the ball. And then you got to look just at trends on this one. Texas 7-2-1 to the under versus non-conference opponents since 2022. 11-3-2 to the under at home since 2022 as well. Texas 6-3 to the under versus non-conference opponents since 2022. So I think there is an overinflated mentality looking at Texas. I mean, Texas did put up 52 points. Granted, I give it to them, but they're playing a tougher defense. They have to not only take that momentum and bring it to Michigan in the big house versus the national championship team. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be a rock fight. The spread is very low. It's kind of correlating towards the total as well. You're seeing the line at 7.5, depending on what books you get it at. It's not a missed line on that one. I think it's more gravitated towards the total in here. And I got it at 44.5, and it's dropping. We're seeing 42s, 42.5s on this one. I think this is more of a low-based number as far as the unit size goes. I would say half a unit on that line because it's past some key numbers on this one. So I'm going to be going with the under on this one. I did get 44.5, but I say half unit, 42.5 on that one would be fine.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think, obviously Harbaugh on the back in the NFL, and we just a slight preface to Sunday. We love Harbaugh back in the NFL, but I don't think the product has changed a whole lot in Ann Arbor. This is a defensive football team. This new coach has been groomed for years in this scheme. And I've mentioned this in the professional football chat now for a couple years, but top level football, more often than not, is good defensive football. Some of these games you see that are 100 points, it's entertaining, but it's garbage football. There's not an ounce of defense. And this is going to be a marquee game. I believe game day is on site at noon up there. Texas, Steve Starkesian here. Let us know what you guys are about. And the gun is about an under 42. My first play also at noon, going up to Syracuse, New York. No longer the Carrier Dome. JMA Wireless Dome. Not that it matters. Georgia Tech at Syracuse, taking the over at 60.5, 1 unit. And this is a great buy low on G Tech, who is actually 2-0 versus the under this year. But you really have to go through why they had two unders. Go back to week 0. We did obviously have them to beat FSU in Dublin. That was much more symptomatic to an FSU team that is purely incapable of scoring the football so far in this campaign. 24-21, under 54.5. But key point there, 627 total yards. The game could have had more points. I think more emphatically, last week at home, out of conference against Sunbelt Georgia State, 35-12, under 55.5. 859 total yards. Georgia Tech 499 alone. And this quarterback, Haynes King, can really sling the rock and move. And Syracuse on the other side of this conversation is 1-0 against the over. A pretty emphatic one last week at home against Ohio, 38-22, 916 total yards there. We expect an abundance of yards, an improvement in Georgia Tech's scoring efficiency. And we expect Syracuse to continue scoring the ball at will with ex-Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord at quarterback, a new coach, a new offensive coordinator, Jeff Nixon on the Giants last year, previously offensive coordinator at Baylor when Baylor was much more impressive scoring the football. First official for me on this broadcast. In the Dome at noon, let's score over 60.5. Back to the gun. Another total, this one at 3:30, also Big Ten football. Maryland versus Michigan State, under 44.5.
Perception versus reality is what this pick should be titled. But when you look at these two teams, you got Maryland coming off a big win versus UConn, putting up 629 yards of total offense with new quarterback Billy Edwards. But Michigan on the other side really struggled on the offensive side. 16-10 win over FAU, only putting up 293 yards of total offense in that game. So while Maryland's offense looked great, they played UConn. If you know anything about UConn, UConn's one of the worst FBS teams in in actually college football altogether, and you will see that as the season progresses. And then we look at Maryland on the defensive side, 8 returning starters, so more experience on the defensive front. As they were in 2023. They held their opponents to 22 points per game last season, and I think this team will improve as the season goes along. And you look at the Michigan State offense, they've had some growing pains this season with new head coach Johnson Smith coming over from Oregon State and new quarterback as well. Aiden is the quarterback on that one, and he's coming over from Oregon State as well. So they got a new offensive line and wide receiver corps. So there's going to take time to gel. They're not going to be able to do it in this game, especially in week 2. On the Michigan State defensive, should be improved with new defensive coordinator that comes over from Minnesota. If you know anything about Minnesota, very defensive-oriented team in the Big Ten. Rebuilt that defensive line and has 10 returning starters. So you have a lot of those guys that have worked together before. Under a new scheme, I think it's going to be an easy coaching job with the new DC. Looking at the history of this matchup, too, if you actually break this down, the under has hit 9 out of 9 with an average score of 39 points per game since 2014. So I think both teams coming into their Big Ten openers will struggle a little bit on the offensive side. However, the defenses are already built and experienced to handle this load. So I'm expecting a rock fight, especially knowing that Maryland playing at home, very impressive in their first game, scoring a lot of points in that one. I think they're going to hit a roadblock here with Michigan State. So I like the under on this one. I got the under at 44.5. So give me Michigan State, Maryland under the total 44.5 as my second play.
Yeah, and I think it's a sharp look from the gun here. And this is just another point of conversation. Big Ten historically a lot of unders. It's just the style of football in that conference. The gun with 2 unders. My second play, another over. 2 unders, 2 overs. And we're staying at noon. We're going to Cincinnati. The Bearcats hosting Pittsburgh, over 62.5, also 1 unit. I started looking at this, and my eyes lit up. I think we're going to see a ton of points here, too, right around 70, 75 points on the mean. And you start to look at what Cincinnati is doing here at the quarterback position. Cincinnati had a really tough year last year, switched some personnel around, and got ex-Indiana quarterback Brendan Sorsby in the transfer portal. I started looking at Sorsby last year on Indiana. First 5 games last year, only 420 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. I don't know what happened. Maybe the gun and I should fly out to Cincinnati and get an interview with this kid. But mid-season, he became a totally different player. Final 5 games, 1,167 passing yards, 12 touchdowns. And that has continued into this season. First game last week with Cincinnati, almost 400 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 38 points for Cincinnati, all coming in quarters 1 through 3. No fourth quarter points. They totally took their foot off the gas. Could have cared less about finishing the job. Almost 1,100 total yards in that game. Pitt on the other side, a whopping over last week as well against Kent State, 55-24. Pitt is unregulated. They've had off-the-field problems, but they do have an impressive freshman quarterback, true freshman quarterback. I should add, a ton of red shirts nowadays, more so than yesteryear. Eli Holstein, impressive numbers, 6'4", 235. Big game last week, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards. And speaking of some matchup data here, which we do love in week 2, Pittsburgh did play a home game against Cincinnati in September of last year, September the 9th. And the final score was 27-21, a lower scoring game that did actually go over the total last year, 44.5. And the key point about this line, books saw an over 44.5, 27-21, and moved this up to 62.5. That's an 18-point jump. And it's everything I just said. Sorsby is balling, slinging the rock for Cincinnati, and this young prospect for Pittsburgh, combined with a lack of defense on both sides, should see a wide open game here at noon in Cincinnati, over 62.5, 1 units. The gun 2 weeks in a row with a fade hat engaged, maybe the surprising one to many, fading his home squad, his allegiance with Notre Dame. Guns picks, 3:30 p.m., Northern Illinois, plus 28.
Yeah, we got a home opener in South Bend, Indiana. 3:30 is the kick on the East Coast. Looking at these two teams, though, Northern Illinois coming off a nice win. Granted, they played a Western Illinois team that is one of the worst teams in FCS. 54-15 plus 408 net yards for the game, putting up 706 yards of total offense. I didn't stutter. This team put up some offensive numbers versus this bad Western Illinois team. And then you have Notre Dame coming off one of the biggest wins of the season. Obviously, it's week 1, but it's going to be a resume builder. Moving on, big primetime game, beating Texas A&M 23-13, plus 110 net yards for the game, holding this A&M offense is 246 yards of total offense. 2 late scores in the 4th was the result of that game. And then you have a Northern Illinois team. Listen, this Northern Illinois team is not a pushover. They are loaded with experience, 16 returning starters coming back, including their top 3 rushers from last year, including Ontario Brown, who had over 1,300 yards in rushing last season. And then you have their top 2 receivers back as well, 4 returning starters on the offensive line, and top 2 tacklers on the defensive side of the ball. This team that came within 9. By the way, I want to talk about this one. Northern Illinois came within 9 points of being in the MAC Conference Championship game. 9 points, 2 losses, 9 points was a deciding factor of keeping them out. And if you look at all the projections, you have Toledo, Miami, Ohio, and Northern Illinois as the top 3 teams in the MAC to get that crown. So Notre Dame's not facing a cupcake here. A little bit of a sandwich game too, and I'll tell you that. You have Notre Dame coming off the highs of highs, beating Texas A&M last week on the road, very hyped up. Freeman pumping his fist, getting really hyped up for his team. Now they're going to go into their home opener versus a MAC conference team, and who do they have up next? In-state rival on the road, Purdue, and Purdue is no cupcake. I mean, Hudson Card's doing things over there. He had a great offensive game in week 1. Then you got to just look at how Northern Illinois performs as a dog. 25-10 as an away dog since 2014. 14-5 as an away dog under head coach Thomas Hammock. And then Northern Illinois has covered 5 straight road games, including upsets, outright upsets versus Georgia Tech as a 19-point dog, and in 21. And then in 2023, they played BC as an 8-point dog, won that one outright as well. So I think we're just dealing with the sandwich action. You have a Notre Dame team that had the super high motivation to go on the road, to go play in College Station in a volatile environment on prime time, and they got the win late in that game. Very fist-pumping effort. Now they have to go back that motivation into a remedial game as 28-point favorites, and they have a big game on deck. This is a sandwich of all sandwiches, in my opinion, and how, as much as I love Notre Dame, I think we got to be backing the dog here, and not only a dog, a husky. Give me Northern Illinois in this one, plus 28. That is the play I am going with.
Yeah, no, I mean, well stated. Clearly a trap game here. Doesn't get much worse on the calendar for Notre Dame, of course, as they get into more big-time, less remedial opponents starting next week, again, with Purdue on the road. My next play, 4:30 p.m. in Blacksburg. Big-time game here for Virginia Tech. A bounce-back game, taking them at minus 20.5, 1 unit. This is just classic Va-Tech football under junior quarterback Chiron Drones. I started going through this, and it was pretty, I would say, transparent how polarized this guy is, road versus home. Go back to week 1 at Vanderbilt. Egregious outright loss as a 13.5-point favorite in overtime, 34-27. But if you really start to go through that game, Va-Tech just came out terribly. They were down 17-3 at the half. They actually took the lead late in the fourth quarter, 27-20, had all the momentum, could have potentially covered with a quick 3-and-out and a late score to get to 14 margin for a hook, but gave it back and then lost in overtime. But here's the key point on this. Since the middle of last year, when Drones became the starter for Va-Tech, he is 2-5 ATS on the road. He is 3-1 ATS in Blacksburg, but more importantly, he is 2-0 ATS at home in Blacksburg, coming off of an outright road loss and a non-cover. So if they play poorly on the road, which they do consistently, they come back jacked up. And this opponent couldn't be any more ripe for the taking. Marshall Thundering Herd. Last week, cover. Fine. Keep your cover. Stony Brook. That is one of the least impressive covers you'll find in week 1. And you also find an interesting transfer portal situation with Marshall. Marshall last year was very inconsistent in their first campaign in a new conference, but quarterback Cam Fonche was actually pretty damn good situationally. He moved on, and the current Marshall quarterback is Braylon Braxton, a transfer from Tulsa. And when you look at what Tulsa's been doing in the last couple years with this guy at quarterback, terrible on the road and notably poor in general. And final point on this game, these teams did play last year in West Virginia. Marshall did get them 24-17. Key point there on the line. Marshall was favored in that game, minus 6.5. You talk about year 1 to year 2, Marshall 6.5. All of a sudden, Va-Tech 20.5 point favorite. Books love the bounce back. We love the bounce back. Buy Vatek. My top play ATS side at 430. Vatek minus 20.5. Next play from the gun, 8 o'clock, big time football in Clemson, South Carolina. The gun taking the road team, App State plus 17, unofficial.
Yeah, you think, Shark alluded to bounce back. I don't think this Clemson team is even equipped to even handle a bounce back. I think this is a full-blown falling knife, in my opinion. They're facing a team that I think is a little bit underrated in this spot. When we look at it, Clemson coming off an embarrassing loss versus UGA in week 1, only putting up 189 yards of total offense versus UGA, getting 447 yards of giving UGA 447 yards of total offense, minus 258 net yards in that game. Then you have a App State team, 38-10 win over ETSU. Granted, ETSU is not a eye-bugging out team, but they took care of business like you're supposed to. 500 yards of total offense in that game, plus 195 net yards. When you look at App State, familiar territory for them. They love playing P4s early in the season. They face UNC, A&M, Miami, just to name a few, and have played them down to the wire in those games. They have not lost by more than 2 points in 6 games versus these opponents, dating back to 2021, 6-0 ATS in that span. And then you have a Clemson team, while scheduling some difficult opening games, they have not played a good team in week 2 historically. Last season, they played Charleston South in week 2, Furman in week 2 in 2022, and then they played South Carolina State. So 3 straight years, actually no, 4 straight years, because they played the Citadel the year before that. So this is a weird spot for Clemson, coming off a big game, playing UGA, and have to play a team like App State that is kind of the favorite to win the Sun Belt. And look at App State, 9-2-1 ATS is a away dog last 6 seasons. 3-0 ATS is a double-digit dog. Then you have Clemson, 5-10 ATS versus non-conference opponents last 3 seasons, 6-13 as a double-digit favorite last 3 seasons. I think App State will keep it close here. App State is the favorite, like I said, to win the Sun Belt. They have a great quarterback in Joey Aguilar. I think he's going to carry them across to having a very good year, 10-plus win year, I think. Just underrated front 7. They can stop the run and they can put pressure on the quarterback. And I think with this Clemson team, there's a little bit of questioning of the coaching. Dabo Sweeney may be on the hot seat after this season. And I said that this Clemson team is the falling knife, and I continue to follow that pattern with my betting, and I'm going to be taking App State here, plus 17 as the play.
Yeah, no, I couldn't talk you off, but as you said, Dabo's had some recruiting problems, and this is this classic conversation that we're going forward now with the transfer portal and the pay for play in college. Recruiting is a vastly different game. We expect a tight one tomorrow night in Death Valley. My final play, 7 o'clock out west in Colorado, taking San Jose State at plus 3.5, 1 unit. Great stuff here. What we consistently detail on this broadcast, you want to find teams, particularly in conference rivals, that are moving in opposite directions. And it really doesn't get any better than this. If you go back to last year, San Jose State started last year 1-5 straight up. They looked like a falling knife. It flipped, and it flipped immensely. They finished 6-0 and went to a bowl game. So 1-5, then 6-0. Air Force, the polar opposite. Started 8-0 last year straight up, finished 0-4, and started this year with a real lackluster non-cover against FCS. What is it, Mamaroneck or like Merrimack or something? Merrimack. Yep. Mamaroneck is also a city in New York or Connecticut, for those of you guys who know that area. But key point, unimpressive, 21-6, unable to score the ball. And you look at what happened last year when these teams played. Air Force did hammer San Jose State on the road last year, 45-20. But key point about that game, it was actually a tight game. It was 24-20 going into the fourth quarter, and Air Force just opened up with a 21-0 fourth quarter flurry. But the crucial point in terms of personnel here Air Force lost almost all of their top offensive players coming into tomorrow's game. They lost their quarterbacks, Zach Larrier, and they lost their running backs, Emmanuel Michel and John Lee Etheridge III, Eldridge III. And a key point on that game, those 3 injured players accounted for 317 total yards and 5 touchdowns. And if you look at what they did in week 1, they couldn't score the ball. They couldn't do anything. San Jose State has a transfer quarterback from Wazoo. San Jose State will be jacked up, and the line is very short. Air Force on the road was a touchdown favorite, -6.5, 7, and they opened up here shorter than they were on the road. I think this is an outright win, a revenge win in conference, which is crucial in week 2 to find conference rivalry games with prerequisite data. Final play for me, 7 o'clock, San Jose State +3.5. CFB Knowledge for College week 4, the fastest takes, the most information-packed show you will find. We know you guys have things to do. We try to get you in and out of the door in less than 30 minutes. My 4 top plays, G-Tech Syracuse over 60.5, Pittsburgh Cincinnati over 62.5, Va-Tech -20.5, and just discussed San Jose State +3.5. The gun with 2 totals, early unders in Ann Arbor, Texas, Michigan under 44.5, now 42, half unit. For those of you guys playing the new line, Michigan State, Maryland under 44.5, Northern Illinois +28, and App State +17. We will be back here Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for the full NFL card. We appreciate you guys interacting with it. The show, the power, the conversation, and the picks will improve starting this week. We appreciate everybody. Have a great Friday night. The Gun, a pleasure as always. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, I love all the beautiful bastards in the chat. Mad Chad, Kajonka. I don't know if I said that right. I probably mispronounced it. Ziggy Balls, Sammy Boy, and even Bears Rock with your beautiful hey, I love you anyways, brother. And of course, my guy, the pun himself, Go Pokes in the chat as well. But I love you guys. Please, this is what this show is about. Get in the chat, get interactive. Tell me what you're on, and just talk about the lifestyle. And also, you can see me Saturday mornings with Guns Picks with some very special guests that I am very excited about. 10 a.m. only for this week because I got oblos, but we usually have the show at 11 a.m. So go check that out on the Guns Picks channel. And please like and subscribe to the Shark and Waters Nation. Like and subscribe to the Guns Picks channel. This is where the beautiful bastards on the planet, the sharpest information comes out. So good luck with your plays on Saturday. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bye.